Here we go. Welcome to Knife Making Down Under podcast. Sean, we'll just wait for a few people to come on board. And,
right, yeah. All good.
And that won't take too long. Tonight, for the benefit of the recording, tonight Kev and Mert were both unable to make it due to personal reasons. And as we hadn't recorded for a while, we decided to go solo, but not solo. I invited Mr. Sean McIntyre to come and give me a hand. So tonight we've got Sean McIntyre with us. I'll be interviewing him, and we'll learn a little bit about how Sean got into knife making and a little bit about Sean. So that'll be good.
Thank you very much for asking me, Karin. Pleasure to be here.
No worries at all, mate. It's good to see you. Actually, we haven't caught up. We caught up. For Bruce's hammering. Which year was that? When was that? When I was down at your place? Was that last year?
It was the year before. It was pre-COVID, so it had to be 2019.
It was the beginning of 2020. It was January, so it was 2020 because it was in the January holidays. I came down with Oliver.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. So it was the very, very start of the whole mess, basically.
Exactly. And then in March of that year, we had the Royal Boys out. And then it all fell apart just about as they left.
Well, you had the Royer boys out, and then 3 days later, I had hip replacement number 1.
Yep.
And the day that I left hospital from the hip replacement is the day they shut down the Melbourne Grand Prix because they had the Italians, some of the Italian crew had come in with COVID. And that was basically the start of the shit hitting the fan, more or less.
So basically,
Melbourne.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, over this period of lockdown, you've had 2 hip replacements.
Yep. Yeah. So first one was in March of 2020. Basically, like literally to the point where nobody knew what was going on. Visiting nurses were coming, but they were starting to do like all the PPE and are you okay if I come in the house? And all this stuff was going on. All physio is by telehealth. Like everyone was scrambling to figure out how to actually do stuff via telehealth and work the systems out. Physio dropping TheraBands in the mailbox, not coming into the house, just doing everything by phone. So that was pretty interesting. They great. Everybody like just bent over backwards to get it done, and then was supposed to get the second one done 3 months later. And that turned into more like 13, 15 months, something like that. As hospitals were shut down, all elective surgery was canceled, everything like that. And then snuck the other one in 4 and a bit months ago. Basically, they were open for a little bit, shunted me in, got that done, back out, same thing. Visiting nurses, everybody PPE, everybody careful, all physio by the phone, blah, blah, blah. It's been an interesting time. So I spent 5 months of it recovering anyway.
Nice. Yeah, fair enough. And you wouldn't have been able to get out anyway. So I guess it kind of worked out.
I honestly didn't miss a whole hell of a lot, as it turns out. Yeah.
It's fair enough. We'll go through a little bit of history about what made Sean McIntyre Sean McIntyre. I don't know if everybody knows Sean McIntyre, but Sean, how long have you been making knives, roughly?
Basically, since the start was in 1993.
1993. Do you remember what like your first knife was? Is there some knife, not that you made, but the one you first owned or bought?
Strangely enough, I actually was looking at it today, and before we even knew that we were going to do this tonight. It's in a drawer in a desk, and it's actually a 2-blade Barlow pocket knife. And it was my first ever knife restoration. It was my sister. She was a Girl Scout. She'd left it in her pack, and it was wet, and she didn't realize it. It was carbon steel, and it had rusted shut. And she gave it. She said, "Here, if you think you can fix this, take it." And it was my first knife resto. Like, WD-40, soaked it, got the joints working, took everything apart with steel wool. I must have been like 8 years old, and I still have it today. And man, that thing has carved a lot of pointy sticks.
Yeah, right.
yeah. Because that was about the limit of my abilities at the time.
Debarking and pointing sticks is pretty much
debarking and pointing sticks. That's exactly it. Yep.
It's everything a knife should be able to do.
Absolutely.
So were knives involved in your childhood? Did you grow up carrying that knife,
Yeah.
or?
Yeah, always. Yeah. So, grew up in sort of semi-rural Pennsylvania.
Yeah, right.
Mom and dad lived on a couple of it. Like we had 2 acres. As a kid, it seemed huge. It was brilliant. Like you walked out the house, past the garden shed, and dropped straight into something called Branch Creek. Like it was literally, I had a running creek within 60, 70 feet of the house, 30 meters of the house. And man, I was out there like a shot 90% of the time. Like if weekends or summertime or whatever, we were in the creek, we were in the woods, you know, making pointy sticks basically.
Yeah, building
Slingshot,
bases. Yeah,
building forts, BB guns, pocket knives, slingshots. It was all day, every day if we could do it. Good,
awesome.
really good place to grow up.
So how long were you there too? When did you leave Pennsylvania, or at least
Uh,
Branch Creek?
Permanent. Branch Creek. We left when I was still in high school, 16. We moved to another house.
Yep.
And I permanently left the U.S. in 90. Got married in 97 and moved to Australia permanently in 99. But from about
Right.
92, 93 onward, about the time I started making knives, I was semi-traveling all the time for the next until I settled down in 99, basically.
So you were
Uh,
semi-traveling. Doing what?
just looking around.
Oh, really? Just
Just
having a
traveling.
gap year. Just having a gap
Just
year.
basically having a gap half deck. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I started backpacking in '92 in Europe, and then came home and then worked for a while longer, and then went on an around the world trip. And on that around the world trip, started my relationship with Amanda, and then we traveled back and forth from Australia to the United States. We traveled together. So basically, from 92 to 99, I was on the move pretty much all the time. Unless I was earning money to go again, I was traveling.
And you say you started making in 93, so that was during the same period. So
Yeah,
you
there was
were
a really full
how'd
on
that all
busy period of time.
how did that all start? How did you get into what enticed you to make your first knife?
Right. So always loved them. Right. Always loved knives. Always loved the first thing I ever wanted to do craftsmanship wise is I wanted to do blacksmithing. That was fascinated me since I was a little kid. I wanted to do blacksmithing work. And no one ever believes this story, but the reason why I started making knives is because at a local sporting goods store, the Gun Digest book of knife making was on half price sale, and I bought it, and I was just blown away. The knives were good. It was interesting. I really liked knives, but the concept of making one totally blew me away. And then when I learned about bladesmithing and I realized that you could combine blacksmithing and knife making into one thing in this same book, I was just amazed by it. And I was talking to my dad about it. Dad's always been a woodworker, and he had a really beautiful shop. He had like a 30-foot by 30-foot lined heated pole barn with all this woodworking equipment in it. And I was never interested in furniture making. It was all right there at my fingertips, and I wasn't interested. And I said, I think I want to have a go at making knives. And he looked at the book and he said, oh, seems like this is going to be a bit messy. And I'm like, yeah. He goes, oh, I guess we could kind of quarter off, we could maybe curtain off part of the shop or whatever. And I'm like, that'd be, if you wouldn't mind, that'd be great. And next thing I know, I wake up one morning. I'm still living with my parents. I'm in my early 20s. I wake up, I go downstairs, and Mom goes, I understand we're building you a blacksmith shop. And I went, sorry? She goes, oh, I was talking to your dad. We're going to we're building a blacksmith shop or something. I'm like, sure. And she's like, yeah. She's like, I can stencil it. I'm like, and then it twigged, like, Mom and Dad, A, they're supportive, but B, they wanted a project. They were looking for
Yeah,
something to
right.
do. My dad had built his own house, woodworker his whole life. They were bored. And so I have a shop still in Pennsylvania that's 16 foot by 16 foot, not very big. The floors are brick. It's got a front porch on it. It's got a vaulted ceiling. It's got open beam construction. It's stenciled. Mom followed through. She stenciled the walls. It's gorgeous.
What's stenciling the
Oh,
wall?
like, like painted stencils. Like there's floral designs and motifs along the border of this shop,
Nice.
right? With like
Nice.
4-inch by 6-inch wooden beams, open vaulted high ceilings, the whole 9 yards. Windows, insulated. It's gorgeous. It's still there. And so then I'm like reading the books and I'm working. I'm in my 20s. I'm living at home. I got a bit of cash because I'm working full time as a cook. And so I started ordering equipment. I bought a Burr King, bought a drill press. I went to every auction that was listed. I found an anvil. I built a coal forge. I just filled this shop, oxyacetylene, arc welder. And then I stood in the middle of it when it was all finished and realized I didn't have even the vaguest notion of how the hell to build a knife. I had everything except the how to. And I'm just going, right, I am the master of my kingdom, and I don't know what I'm doing. And so in the same books that I was reading at the time, I learned about the ABS, and I thought, well, stuff it, I've gone this far, I better actually book a class and go down and learn what I'm doing. So I went down in, I think that was 1993. I did intro to bladesmithing class with Jay Hendrickson. I'd made 2 knives before I got there. I bought Pioneer Video, Willie White, knife making with Willie White. And he forges knives and followed it by hand, and I made pretty much a faithful reproduction of what he'd done on the video. I made 1 knife, forged another couple of blades, and then went down to bladesmithing school. And that was basically how it kicked off. Like, completely nice. Talk about putting the cart before the horse. Like, it was the most ass about thing you'd ever seen in your entire life.
It's not really. I see customers do this all the time.
Okay, yeah.
I see this all the time. It's a pretty common thing for people to feel they need to build the shop before they build the knife.
Yeah, and you know what, Karin? People say to me all the time, like beginning knife makers say to me, what do I need to get started making knives? And my first response is a space to do it. And it doesn't have to be a full-blown shop, but man, you can't do knife making on your kitchen table.
So let's talk about space, because Sean, you are now it's your livelihood. You make knives for a living. This is how you make your income. And you're in a professional factory unit now with lots of space. But when I met you, Sean, you had
that was not the case.
You had one of the most economically sized and utilized spaces I'd ever seen. So let's maybe we should just have a little bit of a talk about your knife shop when you're in Australia. Yeah.
Okay. So, well, and see, this is another thing that just sort of evolved. So Amanda and I had that knife making shop, like this unbelievable knife making shop in the US. Not big, but it was beautiful. And I got over here to Australia and finally made the decision that we were moving here permanently. We lived in the States. We got married, and then we lived in the States for 1.5 years. And we both decided that it would be better here in Australia for a variety of all kinds of reasons. And I packed up my stuff. It was 7 tons of gear in a shipping container at that point, furniture and tools and equipment. I brought a power hammer with me. Anything that I could plug in Australia, I brought with me. Amanda's dad very kindly let me some space down in his farm on the Mornington Peninsula for a forging area. And then we were living in Hawthorne. And for people who aren't familiar with Melbourne, that's the leafy eastern suburbs of Toffee Nose, Toorak, Melbourne, through a family friend. And I'm like, what do I do? And it was a 1/4 acre block, and I talked to my housemates, and they all helped me out, and we built a 10-foot by 10-foot tin shed because you didn't need a permit for it. 10-foot by 10-foot was fine, freestanding. And slowly but surely, I filled it with about a 30-foot by 40-foot shed worth of knife making equipment.
For the
3 meters by 3 meters, 3 meters by 3 meters.
3
meters by 3 meters. And I had man, I had a bandsaw in there, a drill press, my Burr King grinder, several disc sanders, a workbench that I brought with me from the U.S. I had shelving that was only 100 mil wide that went all the way up the walls, and just like everything, epoxy, polishing things, whatever you needed. Everything was like on these shelves, drawers under the benches. Man, that was a seriously compact space.
It was
And
awesome. Yeah. And
it,
bamboo
and
growing up through the floor. I mean,
and
it was.
and it was in it. Yeah, we'd actually cut. Man, you want to talk about work? Like, thank Christ I was young, because we actually cut a 3 meter by 3 meter square out of the most luxuriant bamboo you've ever seen in your life. Had to dig a 200 mil mat of roots out, and then I fought bamboo for the next 15 years. Man, it was like a running battle between me and bamboo. Like, and no one ever knew what I was doing back there. No one ever heard. Like, none of the neighbors ever complained. And I talked to them about it. And they're like, no, I don't really hear anything. And it was just like this giant organic sound baffle all around me. And it was great. It was, it was a really good spot. And eventually Ali Bastion came out for a weekend and helped me put a 1.5 by 3 meter extension on it. And I moved my milling machine and lathe into there. So I had like a little machining side and then the grinding side.
That's
and man,
how
that
it
was
when I was there. Yeah.
Yep. And man, it was an awesome space. It was really good. If I did it again from scratch, I would have insulated it straight away. There were some really hot summers in there. But talk about efficient. I was never more than 3 steps from anywhere. Like, it was a seriously efficient. It got frustrating. Anything bigger than a knife, and it was a nightmare. There's no swinging room anywhere. But for making knives, man.
I like the way that you utilize the space. What got me about it, I at the time had a double garage that I was working out of, and this is 2012. Ali was there, Keith was there. We did Keith's.
We did Keith's Journeyman Smith.
So, what really got me though, what aside from the fact that you could stand in that shop and reach anywhere and do anything to do with knife making, everything was within the arm's reach, was the fact that you weren't letting the fact that you didn't have the right tool for a job stop you doing a job. So you cobbled together fabric cobbled, I guess is the right word.
Fabric cobbled, yeah.
A small wheel belt grinder
from the Franken grinder. Oh, no, that one. Yeah, yeah. That's right,
So I thinking I needed a small wheel attachment, and here's Sean with a drill press and a wheel mounted on the wall. And
the idle wheel was.
You tell him how it works. Yeah.
So it's actually a thing. I bought the basis of that at a woodworking show, and some guys built them to make a little horizontal 4x36 belt sander on your drill press. But I didn't use it that way. So I actually attached the idle wheel. I'm swinging my arm. You can't see it. I attached the wall was over there. I attached the idle wheel to the wall at the right distance from the drill press, and it had a spring-loaded arm on it. So it had about 4 inches of adjustment. And you'd put small wheels. I just got 2-inch sanding drums from a woodworking shop on a 1/4-inch shank on it, and you put it in the drill press. And that was my horizontal belt sander. And I made like a sliding platform table that slid underneath it, that had cutouts in it for the wheels. And man, that's where I did all my small wheel grinding for years. I don't know if it was genius or ignorance. I have no idea, but
no, it was genius. I loved it. I walked in there and I was like, I need to buy it. I was of the mindset you were when you were 20. I need to buy everything. And now, I've come full circle, because now I sort of look at it and say, well, I don't have the right tool. This is part of the fun.
Yeah, how do I figure this out? How do I build this?
And then I do go ahead and buy the right tool, because I'm a fucking tool slut. But we won't get carried away with that at this time.
There is nothing wrong with that, man. There is nothing wrong with that. But yeah, and you know what? Also, the other thing too is that not everything used to be I'm about to do we used to walk uphill in the snow both ways to school nonsense, but things weren't nearly as easy to get. In 2000, I had my first show in Melbourne. And man, the supplier that came to that was Rare Woods, with a bunch of Gidgee and some Fiddleback Red Gum. And Eugene Demetriitis had just started selling some wood, some timber. I remember the first time I spent $25 on a block of stabilized wood. It was the most expensive hand material I bought, so far, I think, in my life. Steve Filichetti helped me pick it out. Like, it was my first show. And I'm like, Steve, like, come over here. I want you to see this block. What do you think of it? He's like, oh, that's beautiful. And I remember it. It was a casuarina. It was a bird's eye casuarina stabilized block. Like, how's that? I remember the first block of stabilized wood I bought because it was a big deal at the time, and man, shit just wasn't available. If
No.
you wanted to, like, that's why Peter Del Rosa made his own disc sander. That's why he made his own belt grinder. And now, like, the opportunity to buy anything you want out of a catalog is fantastic. It really is. Like, it's a great benefit. But there is a little something missing where knife makers don't figure out how to solve a problem without buying the tool to do it, because that engineering, that guerrilla tooling thing, that helps you in knife making. Because if you can figure out the tool to build it, you can figure out how to build the knife, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that was part of it.
Yeah, very, very much for me. It's become part of the fun. I've even made draw plates for pulling different size wires, and all the usual sort of shit. I'm always sending you pictures of something I've
absolutely. Well, I mean, and also reverse engineering the parser from pictures, and figuring out how that thing works. I mean, what a freaking cool bit of history and tools and stuff. I mean, it's amazing.
That's a cool tool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really, really neat thing. I mean, and it's not a curiosity. I mean, that is an amazing working tool.
Yeah.
And I think figuring that stuff out really takes you a fair way in knife making. It really does. I don't think you get.
Absolutely.
I'm not one of these people that thinks like you get extra credit for reinventing the wheel. If someone's already figured out how to do something, by all means, like, run with it. But then, like, make it work for you, and also come up with your own thing when you have to come up with your own thing. I reckon that's really valuable.
Excellent. So you moved to Australia. At what point in that journey between Pennsylvania and Hawthorne, did you decide to go through the process of the Mastersmith line?
Much later. So I actually was a member of the ABS when I did the classes in 93, 94. And then I'd met a few guys in the ABS, and I'd gotten really good. I did a few more classes. I did 3 classes total there. I met guys like, Cookie, and James Ray Cook, Master Smith, Jerry Fisk, Jay Hendrickson, and I'd attended a hammer-in, so I'd met a whole bunch of other Master Smiths that I didn't have classes with, and I really liked the organization. I thought they were a great group of people, really super enthusiastic, lovely people. But then with doing all the traveling and stuff, I just basically lost touch with it, and I was only making knives for like, maybe 3 months out of the year. I'd come home, I'd go back to working, I'd start earning money again to buy a plane ticket back to Australia, and I'd be making knives for a couple of months. So it was really start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. And then it wasn't until I got back out here in 99, and resettled here and started making knives. And I did my first show, like I said, in 2000 at the IBIS, the Melbourne Guild Show.
Yep.
And I still wasn't an ABS member yet. At that time, I still hadn't rejoined. And I actually went to Spear to Steel Show in Texas in 2003 or 4. I don't know. It's a bit blurry now. And I saw Jerry there again. And he said, Bubba, because that's how he says, it's like how he always addresses you, Bubba. He said, you're doing some really nice work. And I said, thanks, Jerry. And he said, you're not a member of the ABS anymore, are you? And I said, no. And he said, I think you should be. And I said, why? And he said, well, because it's, he said, I think you'd bring something to the group. And he said, and I think it would benefit you. And more or less what he was telling me is, if I'm going to sell forged knives in Texas, I better be a member of the ABS. Like, not better as in a warning.
right.
No. As in customers will look upon you more favorably in this part of the market.
Yeah.
And I thought about it,
That's probably true in Texas. I hear that the guild show there is a big dollar state, and they look at stuff like that. There's a lot of collector money in Texas, and they look at stuff
there
that
is
for the collectible value.
That's exactly right. And also, just, it's like a foot in the door. So 90% of your work, 90% of the work that you do is selling the first knife to someone, and 9% is selling them the second knife, and then they're one of your collectors. Like after that, it's they know you, they know your work, they like your work, they trust you, they like you as a person. Well, being a part of the ABS at that time, when I wasn't really that well known, was the sort of the first chink, the first foot in the door of these guys coming and talking to you. And so Jerry was absolutely right. And then once I got into it, then the goal of becoming a mastersmith became a serious thing. It sort of like built its own momentum. Once you're in the group and you're talking to the guys, and you're seeing the other work and you're being inspired, and because you're part of the group, you're making a connection with people. It sort of built its own momentum from there. So I'd say
that's
probably
kind of, that's not pre-internet, but it is pre mass social media internet. It's early day forums, that sort of thing. It's
that's exactly
and stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. It's the Knife Network, and Blade Forums was just well, I guess I don't know if Blade Forums was just starting or not, but it wasn't. All of these things that, like, there's no Facebook, there's no Instagram, there's no this, there's no that. So guys used to budget advertising money to take a photograph out in Blade magazine, and that was, back in those days, that might have been like $500 US or something like that, to take out a quarter page ad in the back of Blade magazine. Your opportunities, other than physically being at a show or being in a magazine, your opportunities were pretty limited, to get your name out there, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So shows and as you say, print, which print's basically dead now, but yeah. So interesting. And got a question here from Tom Rebeck, which was from earlier in the night, but just put it up on the screen a little while ago. And he says, what's it feel like to be the only ABS mastersmith in Australia?
Well, not accurate, because Thomas Gerner is an ABS mastersmith. So I'm one of two.
And Thomas's dates back well before as well. He would have been. Yeah,
Thomas is pre me. Yeah.
Early 90s, I think.
Is it that early? Was it?
He went over there and did some of the first courses the ABS ran through to mastersmith.
I think he might have gotten his mastersmith sometime after 2000, though, because I remember being at a show with him in Adelaide right after he'd come back and gotten it. So he'd been part of the ABS for a long time, but it's more or less it's a minimum of a 5-year process from the start. If everything goes according to plan, it's a minimum of 5 years until you get your mastersmith. So I think he got it sometime early in the 2000s. Yeah. And honestly, look, being an ABS mastersmith, it's a lovely accomplishment. I'm not going to downplay it in any way, shape, or form. Here in Australia, it doesn't phase a lot of people here in Australia being an ABS mastersmith. It probably still means more in the US. Certainly it means more in the US here, and some people recognize it here, and some people. I actually had a guy who buys my knives. This is a number of years ago. He came up to me in a show and he said, "Sean," he said, what is your name?" I said, "Sean McIntyre." And he said, "So what are your initials?" I said, "SM." And he goes, "Right." He said, "So why do you do it backwards?" And that's it. And I went, "Sorry?" He said, "The back of your knife, why is your initials backwards?" I'm like, "Oh, It's not, man. It's not. That's Master Smith. He's like, oh, okay. And he's like, do you call yourself that? I'm like, well, sort of. No, other people like, no, it's a thing, man. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
It's a thing,
But I was just
yeah.
like, yeah, it was hilarious. He's like, why are your initials backwards? So, yeah. So
For those that don't know the process of becoming an ABS Mastersmith, I think we've talked about it at length on the podcast before. But
yep.
I do encourage people to go and Google the ABS Mastersmith test and watch people doing the test. So
Yep.
I think it doesn't necessarily explain exactly what makes a good knife or even a great knife or even a good forged knife. However, it's a really exciting test to watch, sometimes with tears at the end.
Well, and I would just say that no, the test is actually not designed with the intention. Maybe in ye olden days, the early boys, some of the founding fathers, bless their cotton socks. Maybe to them that made the best knife in the world. But most modern bladesmiths today, and a lot of modern ABS bladesmiths today, we recognize the fact that the cut and bend test, as set out in the ABS guidelines, is actually really to show that you can do 3 or 4 very, very specific things with one piece of steel and prove that you can work inside all of those parameters and make it work. And that's actually the true test. No one is saying that it's the absolute best way of making a knife. It's just proving the fact that you have the control in all aspects of it to do that very specific thing.
What a great explanation.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit, for those, again, that don't know you, Sean, you've got an Instagram of McIntyre Knives, and everyone should go and check that and follow that. But
yep.
Explain your style and how it's developed over time to what you're making today. So what did you start with? Where you at? And as Tom Rebeck's asked, what's inspired you along the way?
So there's actually a couple of very specific things I would say. So, okay, I started out knife making. I was not a savant. I wasn't like, oh my God, look at this guy. He's just going to set the world on fire. I was very mechanically declined when I started making knives. I just wanted to do it really bad. And strangely enough, I was quite good at it early on from a technical standpoint. But my early design work was pretty clunky. There was a lot of blocky, square, brown handles. Very sturdy knives, well-built knives, but they lacked a bit in visual appeal, let's say. And so I had my first show in 2000, and I had very limited experience of a show or seeing other custom knives other than magazines. And I got to the Melbourne Guild Show, and I was between Myron Husiak. And for those of you who don't know who Myron Husiak is, an older maker, extremely clean, like some of the cleanest work you'll ever see. Beautiful, beautiful knives, mirror polish, just impeccable tapers, just gorgeous stuff. On the other side of me, to my left, was Steve Filicetti, and he had 6 probably 10 to 12-inch mosaic Damascus Bowies on the table. Doug Timms was across from me, and Doug had made a double bit mirror polished battle axe with a stainless wrapped grip. And Peter Del Razo was diagonally across from me, and that was when Peter was in full flight, and he used to come to the show loaded with 2 8-foot tables of his knives, 16 feet of Del Razo's. And that wasn't because he wasn't selling knives. It wasn't like he built stock up for 8 years. He was just making an unbelievable amount of incredible knives. And I almost fucking cried. I almost went home, and no, I did go home that day, and I was talking to my housemate Jimmy. I won't forget it. And I said, man, holy shit, like, wow, like I've just been absolutely put, like, I don't know what, I'm gutted. Like I was devastated. And he said, well, you got 2 choices. He said, you either quit or you compete. And I went, yeah, well, I want to do this. I'm going to compete. And that was it, man. Like, it didn't matter if I had to mow someone's lawn or bother the shit out of them until they just relented. Like, I was like a Jack Russell on crack, and I just asked everybody everything. And I was very fortunate that guys like Steve Filichetti and Peter Del Razzo, and earlier in the States too, Jerry Fisk was incredibly generous with his time. Cookie was really generous with me. But it hadn't clicked back then. And then, and I tell this story, and I'll tell it again. Like, Peter Del Razzo and I became friends, and it turns out he lived like 15 minutes from me in Hawthorne. And the company that he was working for at the time, he drove past my place Tuesday and Thursday every week. And for the next couple of years, Peter turned up at the shed Tuesdays and Thursday for a cup of tea in the afternoon, almost weekly for a couple of years. And he basically just hit me in the face with a French curb until I got it. He just, he'd look at something and he'd go, "Oh, it's just not, it doesn't flow. It's not pointy. It's, and it was brutal. Like, it was really tough to hear, but I'd looked at his stuff. I looked at Steve's stuff, and I thought, whatever these guys say to me, I didn't want to make Peter's knives. I didn't necessarily want to, and I didn't want to like copy Steve's knives, but I looked at them and I went, I want my knives to look like that grace, that flow, that aesthetic. And I'll never forget this time, and Peter he'll punch me in the face if he hears this podcast, but this is hilarious. I was making this Bowie knife, and I'd gotten this Stag spacer, and I drilled all these radial holes around it, and I'd inlaid silver wire pins into it. And man, it was like it was accurate as hell. And Peter came to the shed, and I had it on the handle, and he came to the shed and he goes, "Wow." He goes, "That's a lot of work." And I said, "Yeah, it is." And I was waiting for like affirmation, and he goes, "That's really accurate. Like, all the pin work is really accurate." I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "It really is." He's like, "Yeah." He goes, "It's fucked." He's like, "Terrace." He goes, "Smash it off." He goes, "That's fucking awful." And I was like, sorry. he's like, "Nah, it looks terrible. It's an enormous amount of work, but that's fucked." And I looked at it with his eyes, and I went, "Yeah, that's awful. Like, it's so much work, and it's so good, and it's all for nothing." And I just smashed it off and started again. And that's basically what it took. That's what it took to just over and over again. If it wasn't right, just piss it off and start again. And eventually you just see it. For me, the lines start to flow. The shapes got pointier. Things flowed. There was more curves. And that was basically the inspiration. Mechanically, I could always almost from the beginning. I'm not being a smart ass. Mechanically, I could always make knives. It was the design and the grace that really took a while for me.
Yeah, there's a lot of facets to making a good knife, and you can build a great knife that looks horrible. It's very, very easy to do that, actually.
Yeah, and they were tanks. Like, you couldn't destroy them. Like, out in the woods, man, people loved them. Like, they were great using knives if you just didn't, if you weren't too worried about the aesthetics of it.
So nowadays, obviously, you've always been forging.
Always.
That's the basis of what you do.
Yep.
And I guess, what would you say you're most well known for then? What sort of knife would you say you're most well known for?
Probably my Damascus.
Yeah. Basically,
Damascus patterns, mosaic patterns. And once again, Steve Filichetti, like, I got to give him credit. I looked at a pattern on his knife, and I said, "That's just, it was blown." I had no idea. I said, "That's amazing. That's just incredible." And he said, "Yeah, it's easy." And I said, "Oh, it's easy if you know how." And he goes, "That's all right. I'll show you." And
every time I've asked Steve anything, he said that as well, by the way. It's easy. You just got to do this, and this.
And he goes, and he like makes a squishing noise. He's like, he's like, well, you know, like, yeah, okay. And he showed me how to do it. And that was it. And basically, I was away. And like anything, the thing that I tell people, that the thing that I tell people is that when you start out making knives, I for one am not impressed by a fancy knife that's not built well. It just leaves me. It just absolutely leaves me dead cold. I'm not interested. Build a simple knife, build it clean, and then every time you build a knife, or every couple of times you build a knife, learn a little something, a little extra detail. Even to the point where guys make a utility knife and they put a lanyard tube in it, and they don't chamfer around the lanyard tube, right? It's just this thick-walled straight thing. Get a pear-shaped Dremel burr, put it in your drill press, one with the multi-cutters, and run your drill press really slow speed. Have a cone in your drill press vise, put the lanyard tube over it, come down with your drill press, and the pear shape will cut a really nice chamfer without chattering. And that's a sort of a weird digression, but add that to your knife making. Take an old belt, rip a strip of it off, put it through your lanyard tube, shoe shine it, polish the lanyard tube up. Man, that little touch will lift a utility knife just that little bit more.
Yep.
And just add those things to your knife making step by step by step, and complexity will eventually build.
I've seen lanyard tubes with glue still down them. So yeah.
It's the little details. Like, simple done well is a really neat trick. And
my favorite knife in my collection. Sorry to interrupt, but my favorite knife in my collection is a single piece G10 handle with a couple of spaces, giraffe bone spaces, by Peter Del Raso, and it's simple, done to perfection.
Do you know I'm completely fucked off that I didn't buy that knife before you got to it?
It sucks to be.
And that is not a joke. That Hunter that from Peter, that utility that is absolutely, you cannot make a more visually pleasing Hunter. And it cannot be done.
It's not full of bling. It's just a
nope.
It's just a simple knife done to perfection.
Yep. And it's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. So and just add those things. You just add them a little bit at a time, and eventually your knives will be really well built, but they'll be more complex over time.
Yeah, right. So your shop now is you've moved on from that 3x3 space, and and I think you'd be happy about that.
Yep.
And you've got a factory unit now. Which you share with other people. It's a
sure.
Space.
Yep.
The question that was: is there stenciling on the wall of the new factory? And
not in my area. Is damn straight there is. Beyond stenciling, the one workspace has got a what is it, a 6 meter by 3 meter high mural of a butterfly and a bee and a honeycomb. It's just extraordinary. Like, it's amazing.
Pretty amazing. I think if they follow Hyphen Knives, they'll be able to see that one.
Yeah. Hyphen Knives. Yep. And I can't remember Sam Passey's. It's Samantha Passey is also part of it, and I can't remember what her Insta feed is actually.
I'll look it up. So tell us about your space now, how it's changed.
So I'm in an industrial area in Coburg North, and we've been in there for going on 4 years now, which is pretty amazing. 225 square meter brick. So it's Samantha.Passey. Yep. Amazing. Samantha's just a stunning artist. Unbelievable skills.
Good knife maker too. Yep.
Yep. Does painting and graphite painting and knives, and yeah, she's an incredible artist. And Eugene, my factory mate, he's he's just an absolutely brilliant guy. So it's 225 square meters. Funnily enough, I built a small shed up the one end of it because I was getting lost all the time. But no, I've got a 4 meter by 6 meter grinding assembly area. And then all my forging equipment is there in the factory as well, which when the entire time up until 4 years ago, working in Australia, my forging equipment was always an hour and a half away. And having it in the forge in the factory now, like January of 2017 was the first time all of my equipment it was in one place at one time in 20 years, and that made a huge change. And also, I'll take this opportunity to shout out to Christian Matherson, who helped, like a bunch of guys, but Christian Matherson in particular just gave me an enormous amount of help. Matt Deschamps, MD Knives, as well, helped as well to get the space organized. And it's just amazing to have all of my stuff all in one place at one time. Because now if I'm working on a knife project and something goes wrong, I can just go back out to the forge, or if it's going really well and I want to add Damascus fittings, whatever, I've got the opportunity to just go and do whatever. So I've got a 4x6 assembly area. There's a small machining area with a mill and a lathe, some nice big layout tables, forge area, some dedicated heat treating equipment, which is lovely. And yeah, it's really, I mean, I don't know what else you'd ask for, in a knife making space. It's pretty, perfect. It's pretty unreal. And it's 15 minutes from my house. So like the commute's not bad. And I actually, when I worked and lived on the same property, I thought, boy, there's nothing that can be more efficient than having your shed out the back. And that's just, for me, that's not been true. I've actually been more productive with a commute because you go to work. Yeah. Before, when I was working in Hawthorne, it was pretty easy to like go inside and answer emails, and then all of a sudden you're eating Cheetos, watching Dr. Phil, and and like, oh shit, I've lost 30-40% of the day. But going to the factory has been, great. I'll get up and just go, and then you're there and you're doing your thing. So it's been brilliant.
Excellent. Somebody asked again from the comments section there. Somebody's asked about the testing of the ABS compared to the guild. So would skills testing for the ABS be similar or higher level? Yeah.
Yeah, totally different ball game. So the basic run through the ABS test, you go through this twice in two different ways. Journeyman Smith, you do the cut and bend test, which is chop the two 2x4s, cut the rope, bend the knife 90 degrees, can't break, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure everybody's seen that on YouTube. And then you build 5 knives and you go to Atlanta, or there's another place now, but traditionally you actually flew to Atlanta. And then you have 6 judges who judge your knives up to a certain level of standard. And if there's a tie between the 3, there's a 7th judge and there's a tiebreaker. So that's Journeyman Smith. Master Smith, you do the same thing again, but the test knife has to be Damascus. When you go for your Master Smith 5 knives, one of them has to be a Damascus European Quillian dagger. And when you go for that test, you put those knives down. The lights are freaking bright. There's 6 very experienced ABS Master Smiths who close the door and they try and find a mistake. That's what they're doing. They're spending as long as they need to see if there's anywhere that you have made a mistake. Every single plunge, every single, satin finish, every single join, every single, is the pin, can I feel the pin in the handle with my thumbnail? Can I actually just feel it? They're trying to fail you. Not to be dicks, but that's what the test is. So there's no margin for error, really. and the standards have just gotten higher and higher and higher and higher. When you got guys like, like Rodrigo Sofredo and Kyle Royer and Adam DeRosier and Veronique Laurent and Haley DeRosier. When people like that are spending a year bringing 5 knives to the table, the standard has to just keep going up, because when the judges see that the next year, that's the last thing they've had in their mind. And so, luckily, I tested right before all those son of a bitches came online. And I say that in jest, but I mean, who the hell, who wants to blade their knives next to Rodrigo Sofredo, and be judged next to him? He's an extraordinary talent. The guild testing is, when we're just testing for probationary, the checklist is it's 10 out of 20, because we want to get you in, we want to get you started. You got to be making knives. You got to be making knives to a certain standard, but we want to get you in there to make you better. And for full assessment, it's 18 out of 20, so it's a much tougher test, but it's not six people judging your knives until you try and fail. So I hope that answers the question. It was wordy, but I hope it answered the question.
No, I think it does. And the guild's the guild's more like about getting a bit of mentorship as well to help you pass. The person who assesses you.
Yep. And when you're a full member, you better be, we've got standards. You need to be a very good knife maker at that point. But yeah, for coming into the guild, it's about getting you in and then getting you better.
Yeah, right. So you've sent me some pictures of some work that you're working on at the moment. I'll put those up on the screen. You can tell us a little bit about them.
Sure.
For the benefit of the
well, you asked me about like what kind of knives we didn't really answer that question. What kind of knives do I make? And pictures worth 1,000 words. Here we go. They look like this.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I'll just get that up there. There we go. I'll just take us off just a second, and we can talk about that. So here we have. Tell us about this knife.
So this just got picked up today. So this is literally the last knife I've made. Started before my hip surgery and then finished afterwards. And it's 10 and a bit inch mosaic Damascus blade, mosaic ferrule, sandbar stag handle, halfpenny guard with so it's black and steel halfpenny guard with nickel silver domes, traditional rosette file worked end cap, pommel, full takedown.
So that's the end cap at the back there, which is when you say it's hand filed, it's filed to meet the contours of the antler. Yeah.
No. That makes us. I'm not happy. That's not my thing. No, it's actually rosette filed, which if I don't have a picture of it that you can see. If you look at the end, if you look at it end on, like you're holding and the points away from you, it's got 8 flutes in a star pattern around it, and then in between each one of those flutes, it's cut with a jeweler's file. So there's actually like 16 radial lines around it. Yep. It's a very traditional ABS end cap. Like this knife is my style, but with a lot of like early influences, as in things that I saw on knives that I really liked, but just done in the way that I like to do them.
So, I mean, people have a look at these knives. If you've got any questions, chuck them up in the chat. So the Damascus is a mosaic for the benefit of those listening on the podcast, and anybody that wants to go and check out Sean's knives. Sean, what's your Instagram?
At McIntyre Knives, MCINTYRE.
So yeah, you can see this knife there. And tell us about this guard, which is quite a nice piece. So obviously getting those curves right, and the nickel silver, what you call halfpenny, is reflecting. Look, there's your hand and your phone in the reflection.
Yeah, no. If I was better with computers, I would edit that out. Actually, so Yeah, so it's a forged halfpenny guard. So that was basically, that guard was about 5/8, 16 mil square stock. And all of the fittings that are black are 1065, so they blacken up in the manganese phosphate. So the little, I don't know why I'm pointing, I can't point at it, but the little spacers on either side of the Damascus ferrule and the guard and the end cap and the pommel nut, they're all forged out of the same material, so they all match in coloration. So forge the halfpenny shape without the bends in it, and then grind and mill and surface grind it flat and true and parallel. Carve the halfpennies in, with triangular files that have been ground safe on one edge, so that you can get underneath the halfpenny. When you make a halfpenny guard, the the curve has to drop out of the guard. If it comes straight out, you've shanked it. Just putting it out there.
Right.
And then the nickel silver is actually nickel silver sheet that is domed in a dapping block, and then it's pinned through the pennies, and then the nickel silver, it's pinned on with a nickel silver pin, and then the domes are mirror polished once they're on the knife. So the guard was completely finished. The guard was colored, and then I had to very, very carefully dome the pin, peen the pin in, dome it, lock everything in place, and then polish them without messing anything up.
Or
Which
it's getting
was,
it askew. Yeah.
or getting it askew, yeah. Which was,
Yeah.
I've learned things. I won't do it the same way. I'll do it. I'll modify it next time for sure. And this guard is, my friend Tommy Gann. The first time I ever saw one, my friend Tommy Gann did it. So full credit to him. I haven't seen one done like it other than when Tommy did it. And he was saying, man, you should really do one of those guards. So that's, credit where credit's due. If you steal an idea, at least make sure that you give proper citation for it.
It's fair call.
Yep.
So the spaces there are blackened as well.
Yep.
That blackening process. Tell us about that. What have
That's
you? How
so
have you
that's
blackened the steel?
it's parkerizing.
Right.
So they're manganese phosphate coated. So all the fittings are taken to about 320 grit, and then they are sandblasted
Yep.
and then put in manganese phosphate, which gives a really nice, really soft matte black finish, which I quite like a lot in my fittings. And then with the nickel silver on top, there's a real contrast between the mirror polishing and the matte black. So yeah, so that's manganese phosphate. And then the Damascus ferrule, obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious or not. That's the parent mosaic bar forged down into the right dimensions for the ferrule.
Yep.
So that I didn't lose, I didn't want to just cut it out of the block and then lose the pattern. So it's been pre-forged down to the right size. And then it's basically heat treated and finished in exactly the same way as the blade is. If you don't, you can't match them.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, you have to heat treat everything the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it'll etch a different color and it won't.
It should, yeah, it won't be the same.
And here we go. A folding knife, Sean.
Yeah, a little slip joint, trapper style. Not really much to say about it. It's actually quite a lovely knife. I really quite like the way it came out. The blade's actually been manganese phosphate treated as well, just by sheer chance. And then your standard stainless steel liners, black micarta, just a classic sort of working knife with a few little touches, blackened spring, blackened blade. And one of the reasons why I'm doing that is I move slowly a lot of times, physically and otherwise. I want to start doing Damascus slip joints, and I could build a slip joint that walked and talked and was flush in all positions, but I couldn't. I was really struggling to do it without touching the spring again after assembly.
Yep.
And it was really annoying me. So I just built 4 or 5 folders that I manganese phosphate coated the springs and the blades. so that I was forced to figure out where the problem was, and so that when I etch a Damascus blade, I don't have that problem. And I think,
Right.
I think I've got it figured out. I think I've sorted out the processes to the point where I'm happy enough that they'll be right. So, a little learning curve on that.
Excellent. And the folders are something that you're particularly interested in at the moment as a diversion from your everyday. And that probably is a good segue to Brad Stone's question. You get the bug of making blades and it turns into a passion and an obsession. Have you ever pushed it so hard that you've lost enthusiasm? And if so, sorry, someone just asked a question, pushed it off my screen. Well done. If so, what have you done to keep it live? Also, he'd like my answer. Right. Okay. Well, I'll think about that. Yeah. What do you reckon, Sean?
My ABS Mastersmith test was not a lot of fun. Journeyman Smith, I was fine. Like, didn't worry me in the slightest. I'm not being arrogant. It just didn't. I got to ABS Mastersmith and something just went haywire. And I was so tense that I couldn't build a knife if my life depended on it. Like, I was just shanking everything. Amanda didn't even want to answer the phone. Like, and she was just like, oh, she's like, she knew like a phone call was going to be a disaster, and like just ridiculous mistakes that should have never happened. And that was really, really, man, I was starting to hate making knives. And then I got I pulled it together with a lot of, long nights and angst and grinding of teeth. And passed and managed to win the B.R. Hughes Award for the best knife submitted for that year, which was, a really nice honor for my dagger. And then I had a chat with Tommy Gann and Tim Hancock, the late Tim Hancock. And Tim Hancock said to me, he said, congratulations. He said, this is the start of your career. He said, you got a decision to make now. He said, you can either just go with what you know, or you can be a brave knife maker and you can say, this is the start and I've got a lot to learn from here. And it was an interesting comment that he'd made, and I thought about it for a long time. And so I think for me, there have been times where making knives seemed like a grind, because once the initial enthusiasm is over, let's face it, like anybody who's made a bunch of knives knows there's a whole lot of it that's just drudge. Hand sanding a 10-inch Bowie. There's not a lot about that that's awesome. Podcasts are good and listening to the radio is nice, and thank Christ cricket's coming back, because that's a week that you know what you're doing. I'm listening to cricket for a week. And so a lot of it's drudge, but you got to find the thing in knife making that really still makes you go, wow. And for me, that's the first time I pull a polished blade out of the ferric chloride, when a Damascus blade. Yeah. That's because knife making's slow. Like, what's coming. There's no surprise. And I'm not surprised when I pull the mosaic out, but it never looks as good as, you've polished it all the way up. It's at 800 satin finish or whatever. And the first time you go in the ferric, and it's super clean. It's not a test etch. Like, shit, man, this is for real. And you pull it out and you've nailed it. And you go, yeah, that's pretty freaking cool. That's pretty neat. That's what's come out. And for me, that's the eureka moment. And as long as I can keep doing that and coming up with new things, the rest of the knife will follow along.
I like that bit, but for me, the eureka moment is definitely buffing the shit out of that the handle at the end and just getting it polished up.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, I've shaped it all, sanded it, and it looks dull and shit, and then you give it that polish that makes it look like a finish. That's funny. But for me, it's a different thing, right? Because you have to make knives for a living. If you don't make lives, you don't make it knives, you don't make an income. For me, I don't rely on knife making for an income, because if I did, I would be fucking broke, right?
Yeah.
I make
You'd only get paid once a year.
I'd only get paid once a year. I try to make more than one a year, but the reality is I get caught up in a web of I don't know, I don't feel I'm good enough or something. I don't know, and I just don't.
Imposter syndrome.
Maybe it's imposter syndrome.
Oh man, it's a
Maybe.
thing.
Yeah.
It's a debilitating. Imposter syndrome is a debilitating thing. I still have plenty of times where I think, man, I'm not as good as this as I should be.
And
Um,
and there's that,
and
right? So I'm a perfectionist. I love my stuff to be right, and I can't make a knife that's right because I don't practice enough. I'm not doing it every day. This is my hobby, right? And so I find that I feel that all the time I lose my mojo, but every so often a project comes up or something comes up and I just get back into it again. And I'm just
yeah,
thankful I don't have to rely on it. I don't have
yep.
yeah.
There's a fantastic Adam Savage quote. Perfection is the enemy of done.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah.
I mean, you can't say it any better. And that is something like every knife maker, every craftsman of every kind has to come to grips with. You can literally tear yourself to pieces to the point where you will quit what you once loved if you don't come to the conclusion that not, you read in magazines like, I always strive for perfection. No, you always strive to do the very best job that you can. Um, you know, every knife I try and make better. Every knife, my goal is to make it better than the last. Well, you get to a certain point where you're pretty fucking good at what you do, and like your gains are pretty incrementally small. Like you learn a little trick or a new pattern, or you come up with a design that's really sweet. Like oh wow, that's great. But you get to a certain point where you have to say to yourself, like, I can either achieve the last 0.5%, or I can finish this knife. Someone will be ecstatic with it, and then I can get on to my next idea. Because I'm 51. I got another. I'm going to say I got another 15 good working years. I got a lot of ideas that I want to get out of my head in 15 years, and they'll just stay there. If you do nothing but tear yourself apart about the last bit of perfection, you'll quit making knives.
Yeah. I don't think I'll ever quit, but it's what holds me up. And I'll sit there and look at the pieces that I've done of my last one, which is going to be awesome. It's going to be different, totally different to what everyone's done. But I have my mojo going on high, on full active, because you see it. Because I'm always sending you what I've done in the last hour. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like if I flip fast enough, it's a movie.
Yeah, right. So,
and it's great. It's great. It's don't ever stop doing it.
But I hit a certain point. Well, you do it to me. You send me a new tool you've made or whatever. But you get to a certain point where you put it down and you think, I know exactly where I'm going to go from there, but I just don't come back and do it.
Yeah.
And then someone comes along with a pencil sharpener, and I'm all excited again. And I
fix
the pencil sharpener.
Yep. But is that because you've had another idea in the meantime? So that's
maybe, yeah. Sometimes, because at the moment I've been pondering the lock mechanism of this thing, because if I don't make it right, it's going to act as a with too much leverage and just break all the time. So and there's no existing examples. There's 2 existing examples of originals because they broke. I'm sure of it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of something a little bit better. So yeah, I probably am overcomplicating it. Maybe I should just.
Yep.
And you said to me at the start, don't. This is not something people have done. You've got to make it finished and not. You did say that to me at the start. So
yeah. And it might take like. I would suggest for I'm not a total fanboy, but I really do admire Adam Savage. Like you like when you really get to know like him in his career, man, you want to talk about a maker. Like holy shit, this guy he's just made stuff like you wouldn't believe. His book, Every Tool's a Hammer, man, it is really valuable for any craftsman to understand that every maker out there suffers from imposter syndrome, suffers with perfection anxiety, suffers from like, maker fatigue sometimes, suffers from like, like having 15 projects started and just moving them around, like moving 15 projects and not getting any of them done. We all go through the same stuff.
Yeah.
And the guys that I admire, and I don't know what they're like in their heads in real life, but when you look at their productivity, there's some makers out there that just, man, they seem to have this stuff sorted, and they're productive and they're creative and they're consistent. Like they consistently turn out work, and I really admire that. That's a really, really very admirable quality in a maker.
Yeah. So this is another style that you're pretty well known for, which would be what you'd call a 10-inch hunter, I suppose.
Oh,
Is that what that is? Or
it's about a 5-inch hunter, 5-inch blade.
5-inch, sorry, 5-inch, right? Yep.
Yeah.
10-inch
So
belly,
like,
5-inch hunter. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just a very straightforward camping utility hunter knife. So Damascus, I make a lot of stuff with ham-ons on it, which I really enjoy. And here's another example of this whole story. I I really started sort of going off ham-ons because there was like, polish it to 2000 and then etch it in this and etch it in that. And then you got to find the Brillo pad made out of unicorn hair and, all this shit and chasing ashy, and it looks beautiful. And I was just like, man, I'm just not enjoying this. And, and I also, in addition to 2 hip replacements, I've had a spinal fusion. And man, standing at a bench and polishing a Bowie to 2000 grit is just not my idea of fun anymore. So I thought about my knife making. I thought about like what I liked in knives, and I like shape and I like color and I like contrast. And so now when I do a ham-on, I'm not worried about, getting the last little tiny floating ashy detail. Like I want the shape and the line to be funky and stand out and be really ballsy. And instead of polishing it to 2000, I polish them to 600. I've made systems that work for me to get A, the effect that I want, and B, get the return on the physical investment it takes me to make stuff.
Yeah. Sure.
And a knife like that, I like building that, and people like to own them. So obviously it's all working out.
Nice. Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's, I guess, as a permanent full-time maker as well, you've got to have, and this is, I guess, leading up to the next question. Do you only make what you've got orders for, or do you make what you love, or do you do a mixture of both?
I do a mixture of both.
Or do you make what sells?
Well, chasing what sells, it can be a losing proposition because you can always be behind the 8 ball. Make what you're good at. Make what you enjoy, and make what you're good at. And I think if you enjoy it, you're probably good at it. So I'd say that first and foremost. You will find your customer base. For the most part, it's going to take some work, but you'll find your customer base. So I stopped taking sort of, when I first started making knives, we kept hearing about these magical 7-year waiting lists. Really early on in the 90s, you'd read it in magazines. Somebody had a 7-year waiting list. Somebody had a 7-year waiting list. Somebody had a 10-year waiting list. And it was like it was the goal. Like the goal was to have a 7-year waiting list.
I've got a 7-year waiting list already.
And do all 7 people send you like the reminder list every year? The reminder email?
Newsflash, they're probably never going to get one, but that's okay. Well, I'm happy.
And you know what? A lot of shit happens in 7 years. In 7 years, people get divorced, they die, they change hobbies, they go broke. You say to people, and some guys are really good at managing it, but I was probably about 3 years behind at one point, and I was sending people emails, and they didn't even remember what they'd ordered with me. and I didn't feel like making that knife anymore. Or maybe I didn't feel like making that knife anymore. So I decided I wasn't going to take orders anymore. And it was the best decision I ever made. Now, having said that, no maker out there honestly doesn't take orders, because you get a really, really loyal, good group of customers who love your work, and they're really good people, and they like you a lot, and you develop a relationship. And, if one of them says to me, Sean, gosh, I really like your Stag and Damascus Bowies, I just go, okay, that's all you need to say. We'll leave it at that. And when next time I make a Stag and Damascus Bowie, you're the first person who gets a look at it. And you have the first right of refusal. If you want it, you take it. If it's not what you wanted, don't worry about it. Because I never make anything. My rule is I would never make anything that I wouldn't be happy to put on the table at a show. It's just that simple. I don't take requests for, turquoise spacers. I don't, my customer base now, I'm lucky enough, I've got a really good group of collectors that say, Sean, do your thing. We like your work. And then they'll say, oh man, I really wouldn't mind something smaller. And you go, yeah, okay, next time I make something smaller, you're absolutely first one to have a look. Or, and I mean, it goes like you get an absolutely killer piece of handle material, and you send a photo of them to it, and you're like, what do you think? And they're like, yeah, please. And I know what they like, and you make it. So no maker out there doesn't have good customers that can ask for things, because that's the way they're. I would bet my left nut that that's the case.
Yeah.
And that's the way the system works.
It's a fair call. That's part of the relationship, the customer relationship that you need. So
yeah,
I guess we'll skip a bit. We're going. We've talked about a lot tonight, so I'm going to have a little bit at the end for viewer questions. And Sean, we've already run a bit late. Are you okay for a few more minutes?
Yeah.
Happy days.
Yeah. What are you afraid? Are you afraid Grandpa's going to fall asleep in the chair and drool?
It's happened before, but Kev's not here tonight. Ha ha ha. No jokes. Hey Kev, how are you? I know they're having a few issues, so I make light of that. But so where do you see, like at the moment, you're a master smith? Do you see areas where you would like to improve? Is there something that you would like to be able to do better? What is that?
Honestly, it's not a technique. It's not a technical thing. I would like to be a more organized and productive maker. I am a very, very, I'm not good at correspondence. I'm not, I am terrible at time management. I'm shocking at it, and I'm trying to improve that. Because I don't make nearly as many knives as I should. Like, as in, there's people that are waiting for knives. Like, I could probably make 3 times as many knives and sell them. And I'm not being a smartass. I don't make as many knives as I should. And so productivity and consistency, and also really paying attention to being smarter about man time into machine time, and I do a lot of old school things that are not as efficient as they could be. Like, for some reason, I just grab 2-inch 410 round bar and forge it down flat to make San Mai out of it. That's a lot of material prep.
Yeah,
and
sure.
it's just drudgery. And I just still think that way from the times when you couldn't just order whatever you needed. And I'm not even being a tight ass. Like, it's stupid. Like, from the time it takes me to prep like W2 out of like 2-inch square bar and big round 410, man, by the time I prepped it flat, like, I'd have the Bowie knife in the freaking oven, heat treating. Like, that's just stupid, that stuff. And so I'm really in the midst of, and I'm not, this is like, I mean this seriously. Like, as I get older and more beat up, that brute force and ignorance shit, that's got to be over. I got to be smarter at saving labor, basically, is what I'd really like to improve on. Knife making wise, really want to make some Damascus folders. Get comfortable with making Damascus folders. I'd really like to have a crack at some liner locks at some point down the track. So probably that area,
So,
and
no
then
barrel knife. No
it's
barrel
it's
knife.
not
You
it's not an
disappoint me,
itch.
Sean.
It's
You
not an
disappoint
itch I
me.
need to scratch. Look, if you want to build one together one day as a fun little thing, I'm all in, buddy. I'm all in. But it's not. I'm not seeing it as my next hot ticket item. Let's put it that way.
So, the show circuit's opening up again.
Yep.
Obviously, the show circuit in Australia was prior to COVID never been better. We just opened up
Yep.
Perth,
Yep.
Adelaide. Even that within COVID, it was a great show. Apparently, 1,000 people
Yep.
through the doors.
Yep.
What do you see as the shows that you'll be doing in the future? Do you
So
see shows as being something that you'll be doing regularly, or just stick to Melbourne, or whatever?
Yeah. Definitely do shows. It's a couple of reasons. So shows I do Melbourne always. Why wouldn't I? I've got a good customer base here. It's half an hour from that. Peter picks me up and takes me there. Of course, I'm always going to do Melbourne. It's a no-brainer. And it's always been good to me. It's a good show. Sydney, probably won't be able to go this year. It's gonna be my mom's 80th birthday in August. So that's just life. Mom's only got one 80th birthday, and she's lucky to get it. So I definitely want to be there for it. But Sydney's a definite thing. Great show. I used to do Adelaide a lot. Was never really a terribly successful show for me. I've had a few good customers in Adelaide, but it wasn't like a Sydney or a Melbourne for me. And I definitely want to get back to some US shows at some point. If nothing more, maybe even as a spectator. Like, man, I'd love to go around Blade Show and just talk to everybody and just bring all my pocket money and just buy shitloads of stuff and, go with an empty suitcase, one pair of underwear, one pair of socks, and just fill up with everything that I can get a hold of.
I filled my suitcase up with Gamaco shirts to give away, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And I took nothing. I took all my carry-on had my clothes in it, and I gave away all the shirts and then filled the suitcase. And it was it's pretty easy to do actually. And I was over the weight limit.
Yeah. This is totally off topic, but my mom and dad took me. The travel bug started. My mom and dad took me to Europe when I was 15 on a bus tour, and mom actually saved all of our old underwear and sock for like a year before the trip, and we just threw them out in every hotel so that we had room for souvenirs on the way home. And I just thought that is freaking brilliant thinking. Like, we just threw out our old clothes the whole trip, and then had empty suitcases and brought souvenirs home. Oh my God, that is magic.
Yeah, I have a new travel strategy. My plan, not that this is my interview, but my plan is to do Seki and Blade as soon as I can. But particularly,
and Seki would be amazing. Seki would be amazing
because Seki is unreal. It's just an unreal show.
It would be a total. And I used to do the show in Thiers in France.
Yeah.
And that was Tears, and that was amazing. That was an amazing show. Guys like Henri Villon and Des Horn, and like, you just get makers from all over Europe and South Africa, and man, that was a really, really cool show. So it'd be great to do something like that, something different, foreign, for lack of a better word, but just to see a different group of people and perspective and way of doing things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Sean, I'd like to thank you for the time. We do have a question for you. Richard Morgan says, just hopped on. What have I missed?
Not a lot. I just talked shit for an hour.
So there we go. Guys, thank you for joining us tonight. Particularly Sean at very short notice.
No worries.
With Mert and Kev, who both have lots going on in their lives, couldn't make it tonight.
I hope that all goes as well as it can do. So,
that's all. All good. So thanks everybody there for joining us tonight, and have a great night, have a great week, and I'm sure the guys and I will be back on again next week or the week after, whatever we do because we pretty much do whatever we do. Have a good one.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you very much for the chat, Karin. Thanks everyone for listening if you did. And here's the royal wave. See ya.
Cheers.